Good evening, blessings to you all. If you were watching yesterday, you know that we had a power cut in the middle of our evening program. So the power went off for about 8 hours. So we didn't even start our Q&A session yesterday, so the questions remain unanswered. So if it's of any benefit, I'll try and answer them today. And if it can stimulate our Dhamma practice, that's good. If it can't, well, never mind. So the first question tonight is, Luang Por, can you kindly give some advice on walking meditation? Walking meditation is obviously something that's been practiced since the time of the Buddha, and probably before the time of the Buddha. The Buddha talked about, or taught Satipatthana Sutta, and the practice of mindfulness, developing mindful awareness in every posture, standing, walking, sitting, lying down. So since the time of the Buddha, monks and nuns have practiced walking meditation frequently, consistently. I wonder if you could add up all the hours that monastics have walked mindfully as practicing walking meditation since the time of the Buddha till today. You could probably walk to the other end of the solar system and back many times. It's one of those underestimated postures for practicing mindfulness. It's something that people often don't realize, that monastics do spend quite a bit of time walking. I know monks who regularly walk 8 hours a day. Some even more. But nobody else will know about it. It's a private practice of meditation. And I would guess that most people who have become enlightened have practiced quite a bit of walking meditation. And there's no figures, no statistics available, but that would be a guess, that it's very difficult to get enlightened without practicing walking meditation. So that's how important it is, and yet it's often something that lay practitioners are not familiar with, don't practice much. Maybe they feel there's nowhere to walk at home, nowhere to do it, or no teachings on it. Nobody's encouraging them to do it. Or sometimes people feel awkward doing it, in public. When other people see, they get joked about, or people think they're acting weirdly and so on. So it's an often underused meditation posture. But the Buddha encouraged us to practice walking meditation. He said there's many benefits that come. One is helps to keep you fit, obviously. Walking meditation keeps you fit, makes you strong for traveling, for work, for other things. So physically fit, helps you to digest your food, the walking. He said it's a posture you can use to overcome sleepiness. So particularly early in the morning, late at night, you can walk. When you're sitting meditation, you're experiencing sleepiness. Well, get up and walk. Excuse me. And also, one important thing, the Buddha said the samadhi you gain from walking meditation lasts a long time, because you're developing one-pointedness of mind, consistency of mindfulness in the walking posture. So you're moving, your eyes are open usually, you're moving. So when you finish that period of walking meditation, go off to do other things, your mind is already in samadhi as you move around. So you may not be able to attain deep states of jhana while you're walking, but you certainly can attain samadhi walking. And then that can be continued in other postures, other activities. And this is one of the benefits of practicing walking meditation regularly, is that other times in your life when you're not doing formal walking meditation, but you're walking, so like walking from one building to another, one room to another, your mind can easily pick up the practice of mindful walking at those times. So you're increasing your ability to practice mindfulness in the walking posture at different times in your day. How they practiced, I believe Luang Por Man said that he had an intuition that in the time of the Buddha, monks would practice walking meditation by walking back and forth. They'd have a walking path of maybe 15, 20 meters long, and they would walk at a pace that is neither too fast, too slow. They stop at the beginning of their path. They maybe put their hands in Anjali, pay respects to the Buddha, and then step out mindfully, but with keeping hands in front, clasped together in front. That's the standard pose you see Luang Por Man when he was walking, and he said that's how they walked in the time of the Buddha. Doesn't mean to say you can't walk with your hands to your side or hands clasped behind your back. And if you do a lot of walking meditation, you may change the position of your hands, but the standard position is in front, clasped together. And then as you walk, you're mindfully putting attention on the feeling of the feet touching the ground, and then lifting, and touching. And traditionally I was taught to recite the word Buddho as I walked. So could be Buddho, right foot down, Buddho, left foot down, Buddho, right, rather than Bud, right, or toe, left. That's making it a very slow walk. But if you are walking at a medium pace, Buddho, 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 till you get to the end of your path, then you stop, turn around, and do the same thing coming back. And you may experiment. Some people do find it much more helpful to walk very slowly, especially if you're in a confined space. Say you're in a room at home, which is only going to be a few meters wide perhaps. Well, maybe you will walk very slowly because you're in a confined space. But if you're outdoors, you might walk at a more medium pace. But a few people walk very fast. Some monks actually walk quite fast as a way to bring up mindfulness, walking fast back and forth, reciting Buddho. So there's room for experimentation and flexibility here. As you walk more often, you'll get used to what suits you. And bringing up mindfulness in the walking posture, like sitting, paying attention to your object, to the recitation, to the feeling of the feet touching the ground, not letting your mind wander away from the meditation object, not letting your mind get caught up into distracted thinking. And sometimes that's reflected in the way, if you're looking around at the sky, what's over there, then your mind tends to become distracted. It's a good practice to do at night, as I said, to fight off sleepiness and arouse energy at night. And monks will often in the forest, like here we're in the forest, you go out at night and walk meditation. The whole feeling is a bit different than in the day. There's more uncertainty in the night, the forests of the night. There's creatures moving around. Here we have a lot of wildlife, so you get the unpredictability of wild creatures coming your way. There's the weather, cold, wind, rain as well. If you're in a place, say here in the summer or in Asia, in the jungle, where there's more snakes, wildlife around that is potentially dangerous to you, that adds a certain edge to walking at night. So you notice if you're walking in a place that is considered a scary place, like a forest that has a lot of wild animals like elephants, tigers, bears, or if you're walking meditation in a graveyard or a cremation ground where people say there's ghosts around you, and there's more of this sense of maybe in your mind a bit of tension, concern about the animals or the ghosts, or sort of the lonely place you're in. You notice that if you're walking at night and you have a light, maybe you have a light in the middle of your walking path, as you walk towards the end of your path away from the light, fear starts to come up as you walk into the dark. And then when you turn around, you walk back towards the light, the fear subsides. So your light becomes your best friend at that moment. And then you walk the other way, away from the light again, fear might come out as you walk into the dark. So some monks even practice walking around the monastery without a torch or a light at night, to both to become used to it and sharpen their mindfulness, because there's usually enough light to see a path, but you have to walk very carefully so as not to trip over or bump into things, but also just to confront walking in the dark when you can't see very well. It does bring up fear, nervousness, and sometimes monks will do that to just see what it's like walking in the dark. Certainly if there's moonlight, it's a bit easier. Like at the moment there's the moon, so you can walk in the dark. Like last night when the power went out, I walked back to my kuti in the dark, and you're not sure what you'll meet on the path, or bumping into just tree roots and things. So I didn't bump into anything last night, but in the past I've bumped into wombats, because they tend to stop when you meet them on the path. They just freeze. And if you haven't got a torch, you don't realize they're there. You can bump right into them, and then they tend to grunt a little bit at you, displaying their displeasure at being bumped into, which is fair enough, so you apologize and walk around them. So walking meditation, you certainly gain many benefits from it, and it's a very valid way to practice samatha and vipassana, contemplate as well, develop mindfulness and contemplate, say, impermanence. As you're walking, contemplate themes of Dhamma. And then sometimes you might find, if you're peaceful, your mind energy gathers together as you're walking, sometimes you just stop and let the mental energy gather inside. So you stop, physically stop, close your eyes, and it's a little bit like sitting meditation. Your mind draws inwards with the samadhi. And then when you come out of that, then you carry on walking again. So it's something I would encourage everyone to practice and experiment with. Even if you're in a house, a small room, you can try it as a way to extend your practice of mindfulness after you've been sitting for a long time, and try some walking perhaps. Another question. Before the earth exists, where did all the consciousness in all the current realms land? Are the current numbers of beings and consciousnesses increased much more than the time when the earth first started? Where was the consciousness originally from? I wasn't there when the earth first started, but from what the Buddha and teachers have said, consciousnesses are existing in other realms that we can't see. The Buddhist cosmology talks about different planes of existence. It's what we call lower realms, like hell realms, ghost realms, animal realms. It's the human realm we can see, and then there's higher realms that we can't see. So Deva realms, heaven realms, Brahma realms. And so it's always possible that there are many, many consciousnesses of beings who may formerly have been human beings but then die and are reborn in these different realms that we can't see. And there's movement between the realms. So, people are born into the world, maybe previously they were in some other realm, and then they're born into the world. So it's not like there's some fixed number of human beings, they die and then there must be that number reborn again. It depends on karma. What leads you to be reborn as a human, according to the Buddhist teachings, is having previously kept the 5 precepts, lived and made enough good karma that your mind, the quality of your mind, the wholesome quality of your mind is stable enough to be reborn as a human, in a human form. So that's a result of your past good karma. And there may be periods, as both science and the Buddhas have told us, where the earth eventually will one day disintegrate. Science tells us that. We know that solar systems, stars, planets, arise and pass away just like anything else in the universe. It may take a long time, but one day the earth won't be here, so all those beings who haven't reached enlightenment will be in other realms until they have a chance to be born as a human again, maybe in a new world or a new place somewhere else. And the Buddha, I believe the Buddha said, he, using his great, tremendous ability to know things, the clarity of his mind, the ability to recollect past lives and know all kinds of amazing things about this universe. He said he couldn't discern the origin of consciousness in the universe. It goes so far back, he just couldn't find the beginning. And he encouraged us not to waste too much time pursuing that question, because it's not really that relevant or helpful to our own current situation, which is, if we have stress, suffering, that should be our priority, to deal with our mind in this present life, to train it and develop the qualities of the path that will lead us to the end of our own stress and suffering in this very life. And that's really the more important question. And speculation about the origin of the universe, origin of consciousness, it's interesting, but it doesn't solve the problem of why am I getting angry, or why am I unhappy, or why am I miserable, or what the various kinds of suffering we experience. This is the more pressing question the Buddha pointed out. Another question. Greetings, Luang Por. In the Buddhist point of view, how does one deal with mental illness like anxiety disorder, panic attack, depression, etc.? And what causes these defilements to arise and overwhelm a person's mind? Well, as you know, the sort of stock teaching is that all mental defilements and mental stress and suffering has its origin in avijja, not knowing, or we say ignorance of the truth. As long as avijja, not knowing, misunderstanding of truth, wrong views, delusions and so on are present in the mind, then we tend to create this sense of self, and we hold on to perceptions and views and beliefs and all kinds of thoughts and negative thoughts, what we call mental defilements. With this sense of self we crave, we cling, and I guess you could say if we do that and the intensity of our clinging and craving becomes so great, it may become what you might call a mental disorder, like anxiety disorder, depression and so on. But this is a very complex kind of discussion, more than we can really do here. And what you've mentioned are really what we would call in this day and age medical conditions. So your first source of help for these kind of things, maybe see a doctor, psychiatrist and so on. And often they're treated a big part of it is, they're treated as physical conditions, and we get medication and treatments provided that are often treating the brain, hormones, chemicals, and so on. from a physical point of view, as it were. But of course, these things can also be triggered by events, life events, traumatic events, difficulties that we go through. Sometimes it's external, so the death of a loved one, loss of a job, frightening situations people have been in where they've been threatened or attacked or been in an accident and so on. All kinds of things can trigger fear, depression, anxiety and so on. Or it could be just more subtle, repeated unpleasant situations like situations of abuse or difficulties in other ways in our life. But quite subtle but ongoing can build up, be a cause for these things. But then it's also how we are dealing with them, how our mind is, how it deals with some of the traumas and anxieties of life. And obviously some people deal better than others. This is part of, you could say, karma. So, some people do manage to deal with difficult situations, whether it's just a one-off or ongoing, better than others. So there'll be other factors there as well, how they've been looking after their mind through their life, what's happened, what their views and beliefs are about themselves, about the world, all kinds of things. So this is a huge issue, but you'll probably notice any person will sometimes have depression, while they still have this attachment to a sense of self, and craving arises, and we attach to particularly our more negative thoughts, thoughts rooted in aversion, fear, anxiety. Anyone may experience that from time to time, and you'll see that if you practice meditation. So the basic Buddhist path is developing both wholesome states of mind through practicing compassion, generosity, mindfulness, patience, and using discernment, wisdom, to understand suffering and how to get through it better. So developing wholesome states, through wholesome actions, and then also developing the skills at recognizing unwholesome, unskillful states of mind rooted in greed, anger, delusion, and this attachment to self-view, and abandoning them. And we can do that successfully sometimes in our meditation. We can see, negative thoughts can be abandoned. When we see them as impermanent, not self, we have enough mindfulness and enough discernment to do that. We can free ourselves from states of anger, fear, worry. We can do that. But if it's something more deep, clinical depression, anxiety, a mental illness, well, it may take more than a few meditation sessions. It's going to take many different things to help. And lifestyle is a big driver of different kinds of mental illness, isn't it? So sometimes when people get caught into obsessions like addictions to drugs, alcohol, gambling, people are in situations where they're constantly experiencing abuse, things that are happening over and over again that we get into through our own choices, or sometimes not through our own choices. We're just in a situation, and they can be a big factor in the mind becoming very unhappy in one way or another, and finding it hard to get out of that. And so we get stuck in certain patterns, patterns of thought, emotional reactions to things. So it may be a whole lifetime's work to get out of that, or at least to deal with it. In the time of the Buddha, there's one nun, Patachara, who is often quoted. She's a lady who lost her whole family in one night, one sort of terrible traumatic event. She lost her parents. There was a terrible thunderstorm, and they died. She lost her husband, who was bitten by a snake. She lost her kids because of this storm. The waters in the river rose, and she had to cross this river, and She put one baby, she crossed with her baby, put the baby down, and it was attacked by an eagle. She went back to get her other son who was crossing, and while she was collecting him, the eagle attacked the baby, and then she lost her other son he was drowned in the river. So she lost everyone in one night, and basically lost her mind at that time and just became so distraught. She couldn't think straight, lost her mindfulness, lost her reasoning, and she became a homeless person wandering around the countryside naked, with no home, no food, no nothing, and people would just shoo her away, and she would live on scraps, and people were very scared of her because of her behavior. And then one day she came across the Buddha, and the Buddha was giving a talk in a village, and there were people sitting there listening to the talk, and she wandered up, acting in strange ways, not dressed, clearly very distraught, and everyone was shooing her away, saying, "Oh, get out of here, the Buddha's giving a talk." But the Buddha said, no, sit down, and he made someone get her a blanket and sat down, and he was the first person to show her kindness since her traumatic events where she lost her family. And that kindness was enough just to settle her mind enough to start listening to him. Up until that point, she had no mindfulness and was just completely kind of wild. But the kindness of the Buddha settled her mind, and she started listening to the Dhamma, and he gradually brought her back to reason. And through teachings, which may have happened over a number of days, we don't really know, but through his teachings, she regained a more normal state of mind, her ability to reason, think, become mindful again, behave in a more normal way, and she became a nun, and then she became an enlightened nun. So she's like a ray of hope from the life of the Buddha, of going from the extreme of being happily married with family, meeting with absolute disaster, losing everybody and everything, including her own mind, and then gradually getting it back again, and then becoming enlightened. So from going down to the bottom, back up to the top. And it's a story that just shows you this human mind has the greatest potential for reaching the highest happiness, but it also has potential for disaster and becoming stuck into depression, anxiety, psychosis, and so on. So that's why we practice. It's obviously if somebody's already experiencing mental illness, there's a lot of work to be gone through, and it may be a long journey out of it. But there's also those who are not yet mentally ill. We should also see the potential for that and keep practicing. And this is one of the values of the practice. It helps to look after our mental health and improve it. We all experience depression from time to time. You could say we all have some mental illness some of the time. And the practice of the Dhamma, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, the Buddha's way of practice, is helping us to both prevent it and get out of it and let it go beyond it. Another question, Lumpur, what are the methods to abandon craving? Is seeing craving as impermanent, dukkha and not self sufficient to teach the mind to let go of craving? Yes, but easier said than done, isn't it? Seeing craving as impermanent, suffering not self, that will help you to let go. Yes, it will, but you've got to get to that point. And as you probably already know, what's in your mind, sometimes we miss craving altogether, and it's affecting us, affecting our mental behavior and what actions and choices we make in our life, our day. We're often acting under the influence of craving without even realizing it. Or if we have sort of recognized craving, to establish enough mindfulness to see it as impermanent, as a mental state that arises, passes away, to kind of unravel that, interrupt craving, stop it from doing its thing, seeing it as impermanent, as the cause of suffering, as ultimately not a self, not a being or a person, but just a phenomena, you could say, an impersonal phenomena. To get to that point it requires a lot of practice. And this is one of the frustrating things in the practice, is sometimes we recognize craving, but we feel like we're completely helpless. So you have anger arise, it's seemingly out of nowhere, suddenly you're angry, and you feel helpless, like a victim of your own anger. And it may be just through, as time passes and the causes and conditions change, the anger fades away, but you feel like, I didn't do anything to get rid of that. It went simply because the situation changed, and you know it may return. So sometimes it can be you can feel quite hopeless when looking at craving, but if you keep at it, keep developing mindfulness and reflecting on things, and particularly improving your level of mindfulness, your awareness of your body, your mind, your speech, your actions, you start to see there is a chance to recognize craving as the cause of suffering, with mindfulness, full awareness, and abandon it. And you may have your own little success stories sometimes where you've seen craving arise, whether it's just desire for some sense object, some anger, ill will, some fear, or some powerful emotion, based on greed or ambition. It has so many faces, craving, but there'll be times when you've recognized craving coming up, you've had enough mindfulness to say, no, I'm not going to encourage this, follow this, I'll just let it go. And you've done that with mindfulness, clear understanding and wisdom. There'll be those times when you do it successfully, mindfully, and that gives you a lot of confidence. Craving is something that can be abandoned. It could be just simple things like desire for some extra bit of food that you don't really need, or the desire to look at something on your phone that you don't really need to do that. Or it could be when you are irritated, the desire to speak in anger, but you have enough mindfulness to say, oh no, this is just craving, I'm just going to let this go, and you don't act on it. It can be very ordinary situations, and you build on that. Of course, there's always a bit more there. There's deeper kinds of craving come up. You let go of one, and then something even more deeper, more powerful will come up perhaps, but you just keep going in your practice. And this is one reason why we do meditation. Sitting and walking meditation is improving our ability to see, recognize craving, and develop the qualities, the strength of mind, the mindfulness, the insight to let it go. And you just keep going, and the Buddha said if you keep going, one day it will stop, and that's our goal. So you keep going. If it hasn't stopped yet, we'll just keep practicing. Luang Por, what type of karma will result in mental disorders in this human life? Oh, well, it's similar to the previous question. So going off in a different tack than I was talking before. In one way teachers describe it, if you tend to not keep the precepts, you're destabilizing your mind. So a lot of drinking, drugs, a lot of angry behavior, constantly displaying your anger in speech, action, especially if you're hurting other people, it destabilizes your mind. It brings its own resultant karma. So particularly if you act in anger regularly, in cruel ways, selfish ways, doesn't make you feel good. It makes you feel unhappy with yourself, brings up regrets, and this agitates the mind. It also brings up a lot of fear and suspicion, because if you're hurting other people, then you get worried, are they going to try and do something back to me? So if you're always living with an angry state of mind, you sort of have that fear that stays with you, the suspicion of others, concern that they're going to get you back. It doesn't make you feel at ease. That's one example. If you're always getting drunk, The mind of the drunk, when you're drunk, is not a good state of mind. You can't think straight, you can't concentrate, you can't use your mind well when you're drunk. And it has its resultant karma, is that you're promoting that kind of mental state. So you have people, sometimes alcoholics, and people drink a lot and take drugs. Sometimes the mental states associated with that, drinking or taking drugs, will come back even without the stimulation of the drink or the drug. That's when the karma becomes quite strong. You just go to that level of being drunk, intoxicated, without even the physical stimulation. And that's when it's becoming really ingrained in the mind. So they always say, consciously keeping the precepts protects you from the more extreme states of mind that humans can get into. It protects you from making extreme karma that will come back on you and lower your state of mind. So associating with people who keep sila, associating with wise people, associating with what we call Kalyana Mitta, good friends who lead you in good ways, give you good advice. You could call it preventative medicine for mental illness. It helps keep you out of trouble if you're associating with people who give you good advice and warn you when you're going in the direction that may harm you or cause you trouble in your life. They warn you and try and help you out away from that. This is good preventative medicine. And in a similar way, when there are good people and we hurt them, they always say, disrespecting the noble ones, hurting. One of the worst kinds of karma you can make is to hurt a noble one. You physically hurt, verbally abuse a noble one, someone who has a pure mind, keeps precepts, has a well-developed mind. You're hurting your own goodness, so you're lowering the state of your own mind when you do that. Just a few reflections. The last question today, in the Satipatthana Sutta, or Anapanasati Sutta, says, Sabbagaya Patisamvedi. Could you explain this? Sabbagaya Patisamvedi, well, it's Sabbagaya, Sabba, all, Gaya, body, Patisamvedi. I'm not an expert on Pali. Being together with, knowing. So I think it's from the Anapanasati Sutta, which we chanted yesterday, isn't it? It's knowing. Gaya here, I think, one way people translate it is the breath body. We know the body, the physical body, from what we see and through the senses. But as you practice Anapanasati or mindfulness, turning attention inwards, then you become aware of the body from the inside. So if you're following the breath, your mind takes that as its object. After a while, that's all you're knowing is the breath. So with the with the Anapanasati Sutta, you're practicing knowing the in-breath, the long breath, the short breath, the beginning of the breath, the middle of the breath, the end of the breath. You practice so you really know the breath. And then you're training in other aspects of the breath from the inside now. Once you know the breath, the awareness of the breath on the inside of the body, as it were, what we call the breath body, becomes clear to the mind. So you have that awareness of the breath. The breath is an element, and it flows and is around the whole body. So even though you may be picking one point to become aware of the breath, say the tip of the nostrils, the chest, the abdomen, as your mind and body become still through the practice of mindfulness, the internal breath body becomes apparent, and you can be aware of the breath flowing around the body, or the breath in the leg, the breath in the chest, the breath in the head, from the inside, as it were. You're no longer concerned with your external senses and what's going on in the world. You're just with the breath as it is on the inside. So the breath as an element is there. At any point of your body, you could turn your attention to be aware of the whole body from point to point. And there's that awareness of the stillness of the breath body once your mind merges with the breath. So that's something to train in, keeping the mind with the breath, the internal manifestation of the breath body. There's different ways people translate it, but it's really an experience you have to know and experience through your own practice. And it gives you so much awareness of other things, like your mood. The breath itself, just the in and out breathing, helps you to see your mood, isn't it? When you're excited, the breath is one way. When you're very calm, the breath is more subtle, and it's another way. When you're experiencing lust, when you're experiencing anger, your breath changes. But as you become aware of the internal breath body, that awareness becomes you become very sensitive to subtle changes in the mind. So it's one aspect of becoming mindful of the breath. And it leads on to other kinds of knowledge of the mind itself, the mind whether it's in a wholesome state, unwholesome state, and whether the mind is energized or when it loses its energy, the level of your mindfulness as you're focusing on this breath body. Of course, if you lose your mindfulness, you lose awareness of that. So it leads on to all kinds of other knowledge and understanding. But as you become aware of the breath, notice how your attention turns inwards. You're no longer aware of the rest of the world. All the other things you're normally thinking about disappear, don't they? Now you're aware of the breath itself within the body. So concerns about tomorrow, gone. Yesterday, what happened, gone. Family, friends, gone. Now you're just aware of the breath itself. And sometimes, the stillness of the mind brings up, we say, nimittas of the breath. So sometimes people are aware of the breath body as just light. So it's manifesting, it's the breath, but it manifests as light nimittas, and so on. The mind has become much more subtle. The actual movement of the breath maybe is completely stopped. So mind and body are totally still, tranquil, peaceful, and inside. Attention is on the inside. But these are things one has to experience through the practice. You can also discuss the Pali terms and phrases, and people love to do that, and it's quite interesting and helpful as well. But you also really have to know through the practice and do it a lot and learn to let go of everything that is not the breath. If you're focusing on the breath in your meditation, everything else is to be let go of. And it can be let go of without danger, without any problems. Your thought arises, let it go. Feelings arise, let them go. What I mean is to let go of that concern or giving a lot of importance to feelings, thoughts, memories. Let them go and stay with the breath and make your mind totally aware of the breath. Then these phrases that you hear, say from the Anapanasati Sutta, start to become clear. Piti arises, sukha arises. The mind is gladdened. You're clear with the mind because the mind is with the breath, so it's only in one place. You know where it is. Normally our mind is jumping around all over the place from different object to object, from the sights to sounds to taste, smell, touch, to thoughts, to memories, and even our thoughts are often very kind of random, and one thought and another thought and another thought. Seems like our mind is moving all over the place, whereas if you train it to pay attention to the breath, then it's coming into one place. So body and mind are very light and feel happy, peaceful at that time. That brings energy. The mind is brighter, gladder. You can keep going, and you can get more skillful. These are trainings. If you read the sutta, you're training in focusing the mind on the breath, gladdening the mind, bringing up piti and sukha and so on. So you're training to do that. It's a training. So maybe enough for tonight. I hope there's something, you might have got some Dhamma out of this session, And we wish you all well until next time. May the blessings of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha guide you and protect you.
Handavayam Dhammakataya sadhu